But Mr. McLean happened to make a call quite early in the morning to inquire for his friend's health. "Lin," began the Virginian, "there's no harm in your knowing an hour or so before the rest. I am " "Lord!" said Mr. McLean, indulgently. "Everybody has knowed that since the day she found yu' at the spring." "It was not so then," said the Virginian, crossly. "Lord! Everybody has knowed it right along." "Humph!" said the Virginian. "I didn't know this country was that rank with gossips." Mr. McLean laughed mirthfully at the lover. "Well," he said, "Mrs. McLean will be glad. She told me to give you her congratulations quite a while ago. I was to have 'em ready just as soon as ever yu' asked for 'em yourself." Lin had been made a happy man some 12 months previous to this. And now, by way of an exchange of news, he added, "We're expectin' a little McLean down on Box Elder. That's what you'll be expectin' some of these days, I hope." "Yes," murmured the Virginian. "I hope so too." "And I don't guess," said Lin, "that you and I will do much shufflin' of other folks' children any more." Whereupon he and the Virginian shook hands silently, and understood each other very well. On the day that the Virginian parted with Molly, beside the weight of farewell which lay heavy on his heart, his thoughts were also grave with news. The cattle thieves had grown more audacious. Horses and cattle both were being missed, and each man began almost to doubt his neighbor. "Steps will have to be taken soon by somebody, I reckon," said the lover. "By you?" she asked quickly. "Most likely I'll get mixed up with it." "What will you have to do?" "Can't say. I'll tell you when I come back." So did he part from her, leaving her more kisses than words to remember. And what was doing at Bennington meanwhile, and at Dunbarton? Those 3 letters which by their mere outside had so moved Mrs. Taylor, produced by their contents much painful disturbance. It will be remembered that Molly wrote to her mother and to her great aunt. That announcement to her mother was undertaken first. Its composition occupied 3 hours and a half, and it filled 11 pages, not counting a postscript upon the 12th. The letter to the great aunt took only 10 minutes. I cannot pretend to explain why this one was so greatly superior to the other, but such is the remarkable fact. Its beginning, to be sure, did give the old lady a start. She had dismissed the cow boy from her probabilities. "Tut, tut, tut!" she exclaimed out loud in her bedroom. "She has thrown herself away on that fellow." But some sentences at the end made her pause and sit still for a long while. The severity upon her face changed to tenderness, gradually. "Ah me!" she sighed. "If marriage were as simple as love!" Then she went slowly downstairs, and out into her garden, where she walked long between the box borders. "But if she has found a great love," said the old lady at length. And she returned to her bedroom, and opened an old desk, and read some old letters. There came to her the next morning a communication from Bennington. This had been penned frantically by poor Mrs. Wood. As soon as she had been able to gather her senses, after the shock of her daughter's 11 pages in the postscript, the mother had poured out 8 pages herself to the eldest member of the family. There had been, indeed, much excuse for the poor lady. To begin with, Molly had constructed her whole opening page with the express and merciful intention of preparing her mother. Consequently, it made no sense whatever. Its effect was the usual effect of remarks designed to break a thing gently. It merely made Mrs. Wood's head swim, and filled her with a sickening dread. "Oh, mercy, Sarah!" she had cried. "Come here! What does this mean?" And then, fortified by her elder daughter, she had turned over that first page, and found what it meant on the top of the second. "A savage with knives and pistols!" she wailed. "Well, mother, I always told you so," said her daughter, Sarah. "What is a foreman?" exclaimed the mother. "And who is Judge Henry?" "She has taken a sort of upper servant," said Sarah. "If it is allowed to go as far as a wedding, I doubt if I can bring myself to be present." This threat she proceeded to make to Molly, with results that shall be set forth in their proper place. "The man appears to have written to me himself," said Mrs. Wood. "He knows no better," said Sarah. "Bosh," said Sarah's husband later. "It was a very manly thing to do." Thus did consternation rage in the house at Bennington. Molly might have spared herself the many assurances that she gave concerning the universal esteem in which her cow puncher was held, and the fair prospects which were his. So, in the first throes of her despair, Mrs. Wood wrote those 8 not maturely considered pages to the great aunt. "Tut, tut, tut," said the great aunt as she read them. Her face was much more severe to day. "You'd suppose," she said, "that the girl had been kidnapped. Why, she has kept him waiting 3 years." And then she read more, but soon put the letter down with laughter. For Mrs. Wood had repeated in writing that early outburst of hers about a savage with knives and pistols. "Law!" said the great aunt. "Law, what a fool Lizzie is!" So she sat down and wrote to Mrs. Wood a wholesome reply about putting a little more trust in her own flesh and blood, and reminding her, among other things, that General Stark had himself been wont to carry knives and pistols, owing to the necessities of his career, but that he had occasionally taken them off, as did probably this young man in Wyoming. "You had better send me the letter he has written you," she concluded. "I shall know much better what to think after I have seen that." It is not probable that Mrs. Wood got much comfort from this communication, and her daughter Sarah was actually enraged by it. "She grows more perverse as she nears her dotage," said Sarah. But the Virginian's letter was sent to Dunbarton, where the old lady sat herself down to read it with much attention. Here is what the Virginian had said to the unknown mother of his sweetheart: Mrs. John Stark Wood, Bennington, Vermont. Madam: If your daughter, Miss Wood, has ever told you about her saving a man's life here, when some Indians had shot him, that is the man who writes to you now. I don't think she can have told you right about that affair, for she is the only one in this country who thinks it was a little thing. So I must tell you it, the main points. Such an action would have been thought highly of in a Western girl, but with Miss Wood's raising, nobody had a right to expect it. "Indeed!" snorted the great aunt. "Well, he would be right if I had not had a good deal more to do with her raising than ever Lizzie had." And she went on with the letter. I was starting in to die when she found me. I did not know anything then, and she pulled me back from where I was half in the next world. She did not know but what Indians would get her too, but I could not make her leave me. I am a heavy man, 173 stripped when in full health. She lifted me herself from the ground, me helping scarce any, for there was not much help in me that day. She washed my wound and brought me to with her own whiskey. Before she could get me home I was out of my head, but she kept me on my horse somehow, and talked wisely to me, so I minded her and did not go clean crazy till she had got me safe to bed. The doctor says I would have died all the same if she had not nursed me the way she did. It made me love her more, which I did not know I could. But there is no end, for this writing it down makes me love her more as I write it. And now, Mrs. Wood, I am sorry this will be bad news for you to hear. I know you would never choose such a man as I am for her, for I have got no education and must write humble against my birth. I wish I could make the news easier, but truth is the best. I am of old stock in Virginia. English and one Scotch-Irish grandmother my father's father brought from Kentucky. We have always stayed at the same place.